everyone needs community. People need community. People need to feel part of. They also want a sense of missionhood. People want to feel part of a cause. They want to feel, and they'll do really crazy things to feel part of a cause. And it's no shock that people that are trying to get well from a circumstance that really isolates them and makes them feel alone want to feel connected, and the benefit of them being connected. Essentially, when you don't realize that you are the result of a big bang, either a big bang that was manifested by a creative force that manifested reality with a very, very particular purpose, a very, very like reasoned particular purpose, or a big bang that was more like the manifestation of the great power that is reality in the universe. We are just pieces of that, and the moment we begin to think that we can control that, and we are bigger than that, and we are the solution to that, is the moment that we begin to move towards being the architects of our own demise.
The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality?
Good. So this is the Jew function, the most uncomfortable place to be. But we like it. We seem to like it. My wife watched one of the last episodes we did with Shai and Davidai. She's like, it was an amazing talk, but you guys are so happy. It's like, come on, the world is burning.
Smiling.
We're smiling. We're too smiley, I think. I don't know, but I can't help it. I mean,
But by the way, this whole thing is about fashion. I live next to Princeton University. I walked by yesterday, and the keffiyeh fashion is very the guy who walked out of J. Crew, and he was he's checking his keffiyeh with the thing, and then the other dude with the dark glasses and his keffiyeh in a different way. I saw a picture of some woman who had some demands. They broke into a building at Columbia, and she was demanding some food and water while they were in there. And the guy standing behind him had a cropped shirt with his belly button showing and his keffiyeh, so he would do great in Gaza. I should ship him over there and see how well he does. But my point is that, this is they have their, everyone has their thing. Our thing is to try and smile and
that's really the question. I mean, you can argue that we talked about it in our original podcast. Remember the fourth turning, right? How these cycles, right, and in development, and every generation is going through it to these four types of personalities, four phases, and at the end of every cycle, the fourth one is usually accompanied by war. There's a big war. Usually war is change, it's transformation. It's, in the big scheme of things, it usually brings about some amazing benefits, right? It's and so I was thinking to myself, maybe these guys on campus who've been fed all these ideas, maybe they think they're like the new, Vietnam wars, right? Protesters. It's a cool thing to do. It's a cool cause to have. It used to be whales, 15 years ago. Now it's Palestinians or whatever. And maybe it's part. You have the fashion, and you have the.
What does this have to do with us smiling too much while we talk about anti-Semitism?
I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes. That maybe they're right and we're wrong. Maybe this is just a natural.
No, they're not right. But you can definitely say that they didn't get to go to. I see those kids. I saw them yesterday, and I was like, wow, they never went to youth group or summer camp and got to sit on the grass with an acoustic guitar and barbecue. This is they were locked out of school during COVID. Right. They grew up on their telephones, on Instagram. This is the first time they're hanging out on the lawn, sharing sandwiches,
under
telling
a
stories.
Hezbollah flag.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. But you can't. I think it's every 18-year-old kid, every 17. They want to hang out with their friends outside. The feeling of camaraderie is wonderful, and just the skewed weird thing is that the camaraderie is linked to. They also had a Hezbollah flag, So
right.
It's,
and we're saying on the other hand, so it seems like it's almost like they're fulfilling a natural desire that just seems to be clothed in this garish garment, but we're saying that this is, although this is really sort of in step with the natural cycles, but there is a bigger cycle, a bigger picture at play. And then maybe if we understand how to connect to the hearts of these people, connect to the hearts of our own Jewish people, we can maybe somehow do this connection of the heart. Maybe it's a big.
Let's start. I mean, I hope we can reach everyone. Let's start with anyone who's willing to listen.
It's true. So we have a guest today that I will call in a second. And he's he's one of those guys that you meet online, a fellow podcaster. He runs he's part of the team, the crew that runs the TLR podcast, The Living Room. It's called The Living Room Family, or The Living Room, and they have a tight team there. I think his wife is there, or another family member, because they share the same name. I think there's a dog involved as well. I'm not sure. And it seems like this cool, great person that you wanna have him listen to you as you unload what's on your heart. And I think it's not it's probably one of the reasons why he's a psychotherapist and an author, and their podcast is about recovery, helping people recover from all kinds of addictions. So maybe as we meet today and we get to know each other, we can also figure out ways that we can help this generation recover as well, either on the Jewish side or on the other side. So I'm really happy, excited to meet and talk with Menachem Poznansky. Menachem, please join us.
Hey. Great, wonderful to be here. It's really.
Hi, Menachem. Thanks for joining.
Hello, guys. It's really exciting. It's really.
It is. We've been talking to a lot of people, and we've been stepping up our talk since the 7th. Unfortunately, this gave us a lot of work. My mom just called me today, and she's like, now she's she knows me for a long time, obviously, and she's like, I think your podcast is really becoming relevant. You think?
I mentioned I was at walking on Princeton University yesterday, so I saw the woman there. I'm almost positive it was her. She was responsible for booking people to speak at the synagogue in town. I remember sitting in her kitchen in 2019 when I published the Antidote to Antisemitism book, and saying, trying to sell, like, let me come and talk to anybody who's interested. And I remember her Israeli husband came in, and they were telling me that it's not a real problem, and I'm off base, and
Wow.
Well, the problem. So Leo and I, our problem is it's an interesting business we're in. If anti-Semitism goes away, we're out of business. So we're looking to be put out of business.
Thank God it's a
I'm in a similar business, actually. That's funny. People say that to me all the time.
Oh, there you go.
Right, if everyone gets healed,
go out of business. No one should ever need your help, which is nice. Except I point out that humans need help. So it's just it's a privilege to be able to be there.
So why don't you tell us a little bit what you do in the? We have a few questions I know we want to ask you, but maybe we'll start with your podcast, because you're there, you're doing it consistently, seriously. What's the Living Room all about? Why did you create it?
So there's kind of two things. Is first of all, we have for the last 20 years we've been creating and support programming for people that are Jewish people that are in recovery from some kind of addiction. The premise of our project 20 years ago, and then today it's true, and the research only kind of reinforces it, is that the reason why the recidivism rate in addiction is so high, the reason why people often fall back into addiction so much, is because there's core there's gaps in support in terms of what they need. It's not so much that they fall back into their addictions, or even if they fall back into addictions, that's not necessarily why they spiral out of control, but because they're missing essential support. They need community. They need support to get vocational help, to get a job, to go to school, to find a secondary therapist. People go for initial substance abuse treatment. They get their initial help, but they don't get the long-term help that they need. So the premise was, if we don't focus on treating the addiction, but just focus on giving human beings, it happens to be we're coming from the Jewish community, so we focused on Jewish people, trying to identifying gaps and filling those gaps, that you would create a longer term, more successful recovery. And that's bared itself out over the last 20 years. And thank God, the long-term recovery rates are much higher than the kind of general population numbers that you get. So, but then as part of that process, what happened essentially is we kind of created a whole sub community within the Jewish world, which is Jewish recovery community. And it's not exclusively us because there's other hubs of Jewish recovery around. Um, but we're kind of we do play a big role in it. And then uh, sometime in 2019, we decided, podcasting was getting big, and we decided we really wanted to create content for the broader recovery and Jewish recovery community. And then also what recovery means is kind of expanded because it's kind of enveloped in people that are trying to recover from mental health conflicts, people that are trying to recover their lives from layers
We've
of
all been
abuse.
traumatized. Yeah.
Right. People that have been traumatized and people that have been through suffering, which is, I guess, connected to this whole idea, it's
So
really the whole
Jews,
world.
so Jews.
Jews in particular, we're all kind of carrying a lot of trauma anyway. They do need a different flavor. They need a certain flavor of spiritual kind of discussion that maybe they won't necessarily find in the standard. So we wanted to try to create as much as possible. So we started creating, we created this other project called The Light Revealed, just kind of a side project of the living room, and we're trying to create content. It includes a few different podcasts and other publications, just to try to like open the conversation about life and about trying to live life successfully in a challenging world. It's become only kind of more kind of present since October 7th. And then for Jews in particular, kind of facing the realities of anti-Semitism or just what it means to be a Jew. Like for example, in some of our email back and forth, you asked about encountering anti-Semitism. One of the things that the people in the recovery world faced right after October 7th is a lot of Jews in nice areas in New York or all over the Northeast, and where there's plenty of like goodwill. Um, like we're scared or kind of uncomfortable going to like standard 12-step recovery meetings. It was weird to interact with people that weren't Jewish in the face of that kind of onslaught and it's weird, and you have to have a space to kind of talk about that. So we're trying to create that discussion, open the discussion there, and really try to create a place for people to connect and also to, talk about what's going on. And then, when there's opportunity to talk about things that are kind of more happening on a social level, to do that as well. So we've tried to do that some. So I'm really
Have you
thankful
created
to be
some kind
here.
of community?
So
Is there a
we
community?
essentially have a community. So there's that kind of feeds off of that. But the goal long term, I thought it would happen quicker, is to kind of create actual in-person community, create like weekend events and retreats so aside from the interaction that we're having through social media and stuff and through podcasting, to try to
So
You guys
what
like
are
do
in
you,
You're in Brooklyn, just so I'm clear, right?
right now I'm in Long Island, but
Okay.
we're based out of Brooklyn, Muncie, Toms River,
Yeah,
which is
right.
near
I saw a
Lakewood.
bunch of names, but which place would be more of the community that you had in
It's
mind?
all over.
All
It's
over.
really all over. It's really spread out because we have a very particular like target, which is Jewish people that are connected to recovery. It really spreads out like I mean, you know, all over the Northeast, basically, and not just the Northeast, down to South Florida. It really cuts across.
you
The question
talking
is just,
about
yeah,
like drug addiction, alcohol addiction
yeah,
mostly, or what?
sex addiction, gambling addiction, but it's predominantly drug and alcohol addiction. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So what happens when the people get into these groups? Like what is the benefit that you see when they have that support around them?
They get well, but I'm saying everyone needs, well, there's two things. Everyone needs community. Like, and I think this kind of speaks to some of the stuff that and you sent me some information, some links. I, pounded some YouTube earlier today. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed interacting with your content. People need community. People need to feel part of. They also want a sense of missionhood. Talk about those people at the kafiyas out at the out at the universities. It's troubling, and it's like kind of like almost like it just drives you to be cynical, like about the silliness of it. But at the same time, it's like less worries me than like many other things that are going on in the world. Is just people want to feel part of a cause. They want to feel, and they'll do really crazy things to feel part of a cause. And it's no
Right.
shock that people that are trying to get well from a circumstance that really isolates them and makes them feel alone, want to feel connected, and then the benefit of them being connected. The other thing that being part of a community offers is that when you're part of a community, when you need help, the help is there. You know, when you talk about, I mean, the Jewish community in general is a really good study of this, you know, in the sense that we stick together, and then people need help. There's kind of, you know, there's systems underneath the surface that can support,
You
and that helps people to succeed.
you say that
So
you said that so matter of factly,
yeah,
we stick together. It's like,
yeah,
it's not obvious to most people. I mean,
that we stick together,
yeah, the
right?
whole sticking together part. I think because this really, they did the study, the 2004 Columbia University, ironically.
We don't like Columbia anymore.
What's it?
Did you
No, I
get the
know,
memo?
but no, but we like the study. We like the study.
The university
And
formerly known as Columbia.
exactly. Exactly. So they did a study in 2004, a meta study, right? They studied thousands of papers, and they all led to the same conclusion. They all pointed to the same conclusion, that social relationships are the number one marker of happiness. That's it, done.
Right.
So we know the answer. We've known the answer for 20 years from them. Our sources talk about it from before.
Yes.
Why is it so hard for us to just to really stick together?
Right.
Not only when it's freaking tough and we're almost dying.
Right.
Like, why do we
Right.
have to
I
be
mean, what
like
drives us to
rock
be
bottom? I'm addicted to whatever, or they're gonna kill me, or I'm dying, and then
right.
the sticking together comes to why is it so difficult?
Like what drives us apart?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about it this morning a little bit in anticipation of coming on here. And I was thinking about the fact that, you know, one of the like the fundamental mitzvah in the Torah in is v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, the golden rule. I mean, you could say, right?
Show's over. He gets it already.
Yeah. Right. So
Next.
what's interesting about that is that the language, it specifically talks about you have to love others as you love yourself, which always kind of troubles me because like it seems self-serving or it assumes that I love myself, right? But really what I think what it drives us to be aware of, and I think when you notice this, and this gets into like the self-hating Jew orientation, is that like you really can't be in contact and with other people if you don't have an essential love for yourself. I think one of the things that drives people together when they face adversity is they're reminded that they actually care about themselves. They actually love themselves, and that spurs some kind of desire to connect with others. It's an extension of our own inherent care and regard for ourselves. When I talk about self-love, I'm not talking about self-indulgence. That's actually oftentimes the opposite of self-love. I'm talking about an essential, like the same way you love your child. It's just, you know, your baby, I remember I had this experience. My daughter was born, our first child. She was born and I was like, I don't even know this person, but I love them and I would die for them. I don't even know who they are. She might be a total bitch. I don't know. She's not. She's wonderful. She's amazing, right? But I don't even know. She might, but I would die for this person. It's a weird thing. And that there's something very, very powerful about that. And that's, you know, so for 3,500 years, that has been our tradition, which is like, if you don't have a sense of inherent self-regard, you can't love other people. And you're going to therefore splinter away from other people in an effort to kind of like protect yourself. It's very confusing because it seems to be self-contradictory, which is odd, which is an odd thing because if I love myself, then if I essentially love myself, so why do I forget that I love myself and why does that draw me away from people? And then I'm reminded that I have an essential regard for myself, and then I remember that I have a regard for other people. It's a funny thing, but I think that that's the answer to that question.
It's definitely a thought out answer to that question. So we
Yeah, I don't
listen.
know. I don't know anything. I just know what I know.
Well, listen, you managed to survive thus far. It's not nothing, these days.
Well,
Um,
you have somewhere to go with that? Because I have a question about it.
I have a lot to go with it.
Go. Okay, go ahead.
But no, what I wanted to do actually is ask, maybe because I wanted to connect to it. He came out, it was like, this is the biggest rule. And there are questions about this rule, but just the fact that someone can sit here and say, well, there is a rule, it was given somehow to us, it's important, everybody seems to think it's important, I feel it's important too, but you were not born into this worldview, right, as we started to discuss before the show. So I'm curious to know what brought you to even be a closer adherent to the book and these rules in it.
To halacha. Well, I mean, it's interesting because we were talking earlier about how I didn't grow up like actively observant of halacha, right? But I would be very like, it would be very wrong for me to not say I grew up very vibrantly Jewish. I mean, I have 3 grandparents who were Holocaust survivors, first of all. And one of my grandfathers survived the Holocaust and fought in 1948. So my family is essentially connected, was always essentially connected, and we were always actively Jewish, even though we weren't halachically observant. I attended Bnei Akiva like programs as a young kid. We were like very much Jewish in our identity, but there was a period of time where my family kind of was on a journey. I guess in some senses we were always on a journey of recovery from the Holocaust. And at some point we became more connected and attached to a Torah-based, halachic-based, halacha being like the mechanisms of a Torah-based life. And that grew and developed and evolved over time. And it took on different iterations back and forth, but ultimately manifested into me, in my own personal journey, being 19, 20 years old, studying in yeshiva in Israel and realizing like that this is not just something my family did. This is something I deeply believe in and want to be connected to. It feels like it's part of my soul. I feel very, very deeply connected to it. There's a lot of reasons we could, I don't know how much you want me to go into it, but like why it speaks to me so deeply. The plurality of it is to some degree the what's most kind of what speaks to me most explicitly. But through that journey, and then kind of as that's evolved in my adulthood, having kids and then raising kids and then being exposed to like more of the mystical side of Judaism through
So, so
Kabbalah
I'll
and
tell you.
Hasidus.
I'll
So
tell you
that's
why I
kind
was
of changed my
asking.
perspective. Yeah.
Right. So I'll tell you why I was asking. Then you can maybe elaborate on it. And Seth, this is where I'm going with it. I also, I mean, not I also, Seth and I, we grew up very much non-religious, very far from halacha and everything, even might some would say very much against it, at least in my case. But over the years, I've come to realize, I've come to learn that life is made of contradictions. It's not about removing everything that's not convenient or comfortable or familiar to you. It's about learning how to integrate it. And I'm asking you about maybe your path to it and what drew you to it, because especially today in Israel, I feel like there's this big clash. It's almost like it's either this or that. Either we all become ultra religious or we all become, taking the bus on Sabbath to the beach, eating a ham sandwich on Yom Kippur. It's like it's this or that. It's feel like we lack or we forgot how to integrate things, and I think a lot of it stems from this. Just I don't know what it is. It equals something wrong in my eyes, archaic, irrelevant, and it should disappear, and I should live my life and I feel it's killing us. I think the answer is again in the ability to integrate as we Jews
You're talking about the
used to know to
polarity
do.
of the culture there.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
have to integrate. Like I don't see, and Seth and I we investigated it. A lot of Jewish sages talk about it. There's no Israel without Jews. There's no Israelis. Israelis are all Jewish. They're Jews in Israel. They're a different culture than Jews in America,
Right.
but they're very much Jewish. The country is Jewish. You can't separate it. There's no this like if you're not Jewish, what are you? Well, I'm like Americans, but I speak Hebrew and I have more swagger. I don't know. Like I don't know what is that. Like
Right.
what are you? Who are you? If you're not, if you really don't have this, 2,000-3,000 years of wisdom and all that stuff in it. So to me, it's very, it's that's why I'm asking you, like, what drew you into it? Maybe people listening may also like, and you like zeroed in right on the money, right? It was like the love, and there's something there.
right?
Why are we so against it? Why are you so for it?
I don't think anyone else is doing what we're doing, and
True.
yeah, and that's exactly it. Nobody can comprehend what we're talking about. Who would even say that anti-Semites have anything valuable to say without saying we're anti-Semitic or we're self-hating Jews? But there's something that everybody's missing in this whole picture, and the reason why the solution is so close is because we're not waiting for anyone else to change. We're not waiting for the laws to be enacted. We're not waiting for a new politician to get elected. The answer is way closer than everybody thinks.
Like us, hit the bell thing on the YouTube so you can get a notification when a new episode is up. Well, this is the Jew function, and let's get back to our guest. Why are you so for it?
I mean, it's interesting because from my observation, I lived in Israel. If we're talking about, I guess, Israeli culture, I lived in Israel right shortly after we got married, and I really wanted to stay there. I had hoped to like build a life there. We didn't do any formal aliyah, but we had kind of like settled there. We were hoping to try to live there for 5 years. It lasted very short. We weren't really able to acclimate to the culture. It was very complicated. I needed to go to school. It was only viable to go to school in Israel. I didn't really speak the language well enough. So ultimately we came back here and we hope to make our way back there. But we were on that journey, but one of the things that I noticed when I had lived there was that there was huge polarity between what it meant to be either religious or not religious. You were either kind of anti-religious or not anti-religious. What I have been noticing in my visits there, and more recently, which I think is a really positive kind of evolution of Israeli culture, is that there's so many more people that want to be actively like Jewish that aren't necessarily ready to take on all the, intense stringencies of halacha, or are at different levels, or understand that they're at a different kind of pace. I think it's difficult for people that are coming from a totally non-religious background, and it's like, well, if I want to integrate halacha into my life, so I have to do it all the way, right? So they become very, very kind of intense. That my family, not me, but my parents kind of did experience that to some degree, and it gets very kind of dysregulating. It's common when you talk to people whose families became religious in their childhood, where their parents kind of go from like one extreme to another. They're totally not religious to being like extremely rigidly religious. And it's very difficult for the kids because they
Addicts.
grow up.
They become addicts.
Right. They become obsessed and neurotic about it. And it can be very, very destructive. But one of the things that occurs kind of as people play out over time and through the generation is that there's a kind of like a settle down, and then you can be more than one thing. And I think that is a really positive evolution. And I think we all have to kind of recognize that we're on our journey. You talk about what it means to be Jewish and how Israelis, okay. I have the advent of the success of Zionism in establishing the state in 1948 created, I think, to some degree, a false notion that we could create an alternative identity of what it meant to be Jewish that was a secular nation. But it's complicated because what it means to be a Jew is much more than just attachment to a secular government. And part of
or a religion. We see that it's not
exactly
only a religion.
Exactly. Because what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be a Jew is more than just like a personal identity, a national identity, and an ideology. It's a combination of all of those things. And it's not necessarily an all or nothing sort of thing. Right. I'll give you an example. I was thinking about that like last few days. Like, so in halacha, if you look in halacha, like let's say if you look in the Rambam in the Maimonides, in his laws about charity. So in the laws about charity, there's laws about how you give charity to other Jews who you live around, but there's also laws about how you give charity to other non-Jews that are living within your community and actively participating in your culture. And then there are other laws about how you give charity, or don't have the obligation to give charity, to Gentiles that are kind of living in your vicinity, but not friendly and not living according to the kind of, not to the religious tenets, because they're not required to live by the religious tenets.
Baal
They're not kind of
Leo,
participating
just
in your
one second.
society.
Leo, Baal mentions this in the love of the creator and love of humans that we just read, he touches upon this exact point.
So that's like it's an essentially interesting thing about what it means to be a Jew. What it means to be a Jew is not necessarily even to be Jewish. It means to be living within. I mean, there is something about being Jewish, don't get me wrong, and what that means and how halacha dictates that. That's a different discussion. But what it means to be a Jew is also extended, meaning the fact that there's such a thing, the Hebrew term would be a ger toshav, which means someone's allowed, a Gentile is allowed to live within our, so to speak, allowed, is welcome to live within our community and participate within the community without being actively, without even being Jewish, much less a Jew who's, let's say, struggling to adhere to layers of halacha. Now there's laws about how that person, the way in which you're allowed to, let's say, the trustworthiness you can have in that person saying that, let's say, something's kosher or not kosher, right? Someone's not careful about halacha and they tell you something's kosher, you can't necessarily trust them because they might be lax and tell you something's not kosher because they don't take it seriously. That's true, but it doesn't make them not Jewish, right? They are Jewish and you have an obligation to support them and to help them. And the same obligation you have, let's say, to, for example, to give them like strict feedback about maybe if the way in which they're living is opposite, you have an equal obligation, if not more of an obligation, if you're looking at like the teachings of Pnimius HaTorah and Hasidus, to reach out to them in love and to try to be connected to them. In fact, you're not allowed to give harsh feedback to somebody who's not living or operating at the level that you're operating at. Meaning if you like, this is according to like our spiritual conviction and also halacha, right? Which was shocking, I think, to me, I think to some degree to see it like in black and white, that like if you're living in the vicinity of somebody who's struggling to adhere to halacha, you're meant to not impose too much upon them and more to reach out to them in love and connection in the hope that you'll maybe influence them and draw them closer to your path, but not in a way of imposing, as opposed to somebody else who, let's say, is adhering to the same level of halacha as you are. You're obligated to give them firm feedback when you feel like they're kind of falling off the path. But even so, at the same time, you're obligated as much to love them.
Or as opposed to a Muslim, who, like
as opposed to a Muslim, you're not obligated to do anything to a Muslim unless they're trying to hurt you.
No, I mean the reverse. The Muslim will feel compelled to coerce you to do what he wants you to do.
It's a very different thing, right? It's a very different religious tradition. It's one of the things that I was referring to earlier. The plurality of our faith is very different than other religions, which is why Judaism is not really a religion. There's religious components to Judaism, but it's not really a religion in the classic sense.
It's why we say we have the saying that there's no coercion in spirituality, or in other words, because there's no coercion in love. You can't, because ultimately, if you go back to that one rule, klal, that's like encompasses everything.
Yeah,
it is about reaching love. It's not about just eating kosher food. It's about eventually, ultimately, reaching love, because that's how you meet the Creator. That's that quality of love and bestowal that is everywhere. You don't feel it because you lack that quality in you. You only have egoistic love, selfish love, self-interest love. But if you can really develop that quality, you can feel everything. But
okay,
you can't
guys, talkless. We're here to solve anti-Semitism. So let's say
Menachem is weaving such a nice tale here. I'm entranced. I'm usually we're used to shouting at our guests, and this is very,
I know you have us very. I feel like we're in a session. We're like very calm and thinking, but let's look through this spiritual lens on what you're saying, on who you can speak to and how you can speak to. So we have a serious problem that we're all going through now. So, going and trying to debate with somebody out there who, I'm just using the example you just gave, right?
Yeah.
Someone who doesn't get what you're talking about. So going out and there, you're going to get the least return for your effort.
Right.
But you can be like, so you talked about how to deal with that guy and how to deal with the guy who's off the derech. How do you deal with the guy who's your brother next to you? What should you do then? What does Rambam say then about that guy?
What do you mean?
Well, you said if the guy's off the path, even if he's from the nations of the world, but he's living among you, so that's one way. Then you got a guy who's struggling to hold his observance, so you try and deal with him more lightly. But now what
Right.
about the guy who's side by side with you, trying to be a brother in arms with you? What's
Right.
that approach?
You have to speak harshly to them.
Okay,
Matter
so
of factly. I don't, not harshly, but matter of factly.
so let's speak
Right.
matter of factly. So
Yeah.
when we're so this is when we're looking at this problem, we're also, and we came across this not through the Rambam, but more um I don't know, through just experience, trying to talk to people about this, and realizing more and more and more that while we want the message to be spread far and wide, really the ones that we want to speak very directly to are the ones who are with us and who understand that, um well, like you opened with this, like the v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that like starting here and being serious about this, like finding those among us who seriously can hear this, can agree to this, and are willing to try implementing this. And then from there, because also the Jews have this whole other magic piece, which a lot of people, we spoke to a lot of people, most people, and most people in the world, this whole magic piece about us, like it's not really considered. I don't know what I mean by that magic piece, but it's not usual that someone fires 300 rockets at you and like I don't know. I don't want to talk political or I don't want to talk anything else. It's not normal. Let's just talk strictly historical, for example. It's not normal
Right.
that the Roman Empire tries to kill you and the Greek Empire tries to kill you and the Egyptian Empire tries to kill you and the Persian Empire tries to kill you and the Nazis try and kill you and you're still around. It's just not
Right.
normal. There's
Right.
some other thing about us. So let's get to that point. Let's find those people. So we're here. We're guys who are on the derech together. Who, I'm not talking about halacha. I'm talking about this klal gadol b'Torah, this v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and let's cook this thing. Let's try and develop this between us, and then let's let the magic happen. Let's let it spread. Right, the Jewish idea spreads out to the whole world. I mean, the whole world believes in one God now because of some Jew. So let's try and
Right.
activate this system. That's what I want to tighten the screws on in this conversation, is like
I mean, I
we
feel like part of
understand.
what you're touching on is that there's two things. Is first of all, there's an ineffable part of what it means to be a Jew. That's almost mysterious. Even to ask the question, I was watching your video on YouTube, like what is a Jew? It's a very difficult question to ask. You pose a really interesting theory, which spoke to me in a lot of ways. I think it touches on a lot of it, but even so, I think the minute you try to like put a finger on what anything is very difficult. Putting a finger on what a Jew is even more difficult, and even more so, putting a finger on what reality is and what God is even more difficult, right? And essentially, if we are like extensions of our Creator as living free-willed beings, there's a part of us that's always going to be unknowable, and because so there's that component, but then also going back to what I was saying earlier, which I think is comes to the foundation of the whole thing, that like we have to really appreciate what we are, and I think this is kind of to some degree what your premise is. So it definitely speaks to me. If we better appreciate and understand what we are and what it is we're trying to offer the world, and spend less time preoccupied by, let's say, noise, and let's say getting up and debating, though I think there's value in showing up to those universities. I have friends that have done that and I really value it, and I've wanted to myself. Just I think to speak truth to power and exhibit power to power, I think there's value in that as a human being, to fight for what's right. Ultimately, though, I don't think there's a lot of solution in that. I think that it's necessary to demonstrate influence and not just stay quiet, you know. But at the
But
same time, I think that the solution is found in having more regard for who we are and what we offer the world, and trying to grow that more and more and more, and for the purpose of it happening on its own, without an expectation that we're going to necessarily solve the problem. I think I have this like fundamental underlying sense in individual human lives, but on also in overall history, that some of the worst things that have happened in history have happened because humans thought that they could outthink evolution. They thought that they could solve the problem. They were going to come up with some kind of social system or social thought mechanism that was going to like resolve the Jewish question or the human problem. We don't need to solve the human problem. We need to get out of the way and try to be our best selves collectively. And if we do that, we're headed in a good direction. If you look at overall kind of where things are going in society, things are moving positively. Not that there's nothing to be worried about. There's a lot to be worried about, and there's a lot of like nefarious characters that we have to be nervous about. I'm more nervous about, Davos than I am about a bunch of, college students, though it's worrisome. It's honestly, like, elites getting together to think that they can manipulate reality is more terrifying to me than, unadvised, ill-advised college students. But all those things are, worrisome to me.
So I want, Menachem, I want just there, this sensation that we can manipulate reality. And this is a shared feeling that I found also. A lot of people, this is especially true for liberal thinkers, which I am, I see myself as a liberal thinker. But if you kind of go all the way with this idea, then, you're the master of your reality. You do whatever you want. There's nothing, no judge and no judgment. And, and we'll do as we please, so to speak, right? We'll decide, how things should be and how they can be, and we'll, create problems, solve problems. It's all on us. And I feel like this is one of the main sticking points between, between moving towards a solution and staying where we are. This sensation of, okay, you don't have to believe that there's a God as a creator, but do you really believe that this is what you see, is that this is it, and you're seeing everything and you're in control of everything, and you need to, you create everything and you solve everything, and all, like it seems a bit, the hubris there is a bit, it's much. But I find that this is one of the main really points of division between.
Isn't there something in recovery where you give up a lot of power or something?
Well, in AA, I know. In AA, I know the 12th step, right? It's like there's a higher power, but I'm not talking about a God in that sense, or even that is fine. You know what I mean? Like if you if having that that belief, let's say, instilled in you, just so you stop fighting for a second, I'll take that, right? I'll give it to people, but I'm talking about a higher relationship with that. Really, again,
well, I think what it sounds to me like you're talking about is a sense of humility that you are part of something broader than yourself. I remember it's like a story that I've told many times to people that I work with, but I remember I had a friend who like did some work in my house. He was like a carpenter, and he was a guy in AA. And obviously I'm very like kind of connected to that world and very enamored by that world. One of my books was about the 12 steps. And anyway, so I don't remember if he was my carpenter first or I don't remember how I met him, but exactly. But he did some work on my house. And then, at the end of the day, we'd like sit down and play chess. And he was an interesting guy because he was like a very ardent atheist, but worked a very strong 12-step program. So that fascinated me. I had, as an atheist, practice spirituality. And we were like having this debate over a chess game. And it struck me at some point that the fundamental separation between he and I in our beliefs about almost all of life was whether the creative force that had manifested reality had an opinion or not. He believed that it had no opinion. It was somewhat random. And I believed that it did have an opinion and therefore had like a very particular version. And really, his relationship with that power and my relationship with that power are really the same. Meaning his is just more ambiguous, mine was more specific, but it really wasn't that different. And once you traverse that like singular piece, it's all the same. Meaning I agree with you. I think that essentially when you don't realize that you are the result of a big bang, either a big bang that was manifested by a creative force that manifested reality with a very, very particular purpose, a very, very like reasoned particular purpose, or a big bang that was more like the manifestation of the great power that is reality in the universe. We are just pieces of that, and thinking and the moment we begin to think that we can control that and we are bigger than that and we are the solution to that is the moment that we begin to move towards being the architects of our own demise, which is, I think, really what you've seen in that kind of human history. It's like you come up with this system and you just get too arrogant about it instead of realizing that we're kind of like part of an outflow of, you could call it an outflow of love or an outflow of light that's moving it's moving outward from a singular instant or what preceded an instant because it was before time, right? So like once you realize that, and I think part of religious practice is what the really positive parts about it, and this is a lot of what people in the 12-step programs try to do, is kind of once you start to ride the light or ride the love, it shifts your context. Now you're trying to like adapt and adjust. You're no longer kind of fighting it or pushing it or trying to make it go in a particular direction. You're trying to be a good passenger instead of like, instead of like trying to like make the thing go in a direction that it's not supposed to go. And when you try to make the thing go in a direction you want it to go, it revolts really, really violently. And it's not good. It's not a good thing at all. So I tend to kind of agree with that we really have to try to get out of the way and stop trying to be so much stuck in imposition.
Due function is really it's a desperate attempt to change something about the rise in anti-Semitism that doesn't seem to go away, and looking at history usually ends with something terrible before we reach relative quiet again. But we don't want to reach something terrible. We want to do it now. So that's why we're doing this podcast. And if you like this, also consider leaving a small contribution on our Patreon channel. Right. We both have day jobs, by the way, so we're not hoping to make money from this. We're hoping to see some change of heart.
Any funds are used to get this out there, to get this to people. We consider this the same way you go out every day to get money to feed your family, put a roof over your head. This is also critically important to our future, to our safety, to a good world, not only for Jews, but for everyone.
Well, this is the Jew function, and let's get back to our guest.
This what you just described, probably if we got into the details of it, you're thinking it through this experience with your friend and through all of your work. It's very similar, parallel to what Leo and I are saying, or what we're studying around anti-Semitism. Like, nature has a plan, and as long as we allow meaning, if we connect together better and better, and in more and more organized and healthy, natural ways, then nature can keep progressing and everything works out really well, because there's plenty of money, plenty of water, plenty of air, plenty of everything that is needed. If we don't, then nature keeps progressing, but kicks the shit out of us as it pushes us forward. So I see a lot of parallels to like our, the story that we're always telling and the story that you just told.
There's just one catch to what everything described, and that is just that word natural. It's natural between, as you said, you felt to your daughter, right? But it's unnatural toward other people. And for a reason, because we are essentially...
Meaning we don't feel that we love everyone out there on the street as ourselves. Naturally.
That's the shift that has to happen. And and the other thing we're saying, and not just us, again, every Jewish sage that really wrote about the internality of things, wrote about that you need to make efforts toward that, and then you start to be helped by the system, by the love, the light, the creator, call it whatever you want. But these laws work a certain way. They operate a certain way. When you try to flow with them, they help you out. When you go against them, they squash you, basically.
One of the interesting premises, do we actually naturally hate each other or not? Or do we actually not love each other or not? And I think that
let's talk about it for a second.
No, I just wanted just a quote from Neil Donald Walsh, a good non-Jew. He said, when our remember this guy, he wrote Conversation with God and all that. He had a moment, and he says, when as long as our interests meet, it's fine. But if our interests don't meet, maybe they oppose, I may disagree with you. I may even have to kill you. And so that's the thing that's naturally at play. As long as there's some sort of a mutually beneficial equilibrium, we play along. But if you really probe inside, you do love yourself more than you love everyone else by nature. But when you let it take over you, that's the death of you. When you band with other people to struggle against it, against the destructive qualities of that force, that's when good things happen. But it's a struggle. It doesn't happen naturally. Or you need a lot of drugs for it. But naturally, but
what if I push back on that? What if I push back on that? What if
on the drugs or on the
there's an old Jewish saying. It's a little bit of a goyish cup way of looking at it. I don't think that that's necessarily true. Meaning, I think that if you're looking at the world through a materialist way of seeing things, then on the outset, if your interests don't align with my interests, and if you conflict with my interests, then I'm going to like lash out at you. It's human nature, and part of the way in which it's human nature is actually if we're looking at it from like the lens of like Jewish mysticism or Jewish spiritual perspectives on what reality is. So then the animal part of us, or the part of us that's just part of the natural order, as humans would tell us that if you threaten me, then I'm going to come at you. I'm only aligned to you to the degree that it works for me, which means I'm only capable as a human being. You talked about love before, in what's called ahava shetluya b'davar, which is a love that is reliant upon something else, right? So that's the kind of the outcome that you're coming to, is that a human being is only capable at the end of the day, when you strip it all down, to ahava shetluya b'davar, and the only thing we can do is try to supersede that and cause ourselves to live counter nature. But part of I mean, what it means to be Jewish is to believe that there's actually an ineffable part of us that's actually capable of ahava she'eino shetluya b'davar, by a love that's not reliant.
Okay. Hold on. Let's slow it down. We have to slow this down. This is wonderful stuff. No, you're really doing this. Is great. We're really laying it out here. But the second kind of love, okay, this unconditional love, this altruism, right? So where's the button to turn that one on, right? So I think the difference is we also are on that track, but I think you're saying that it's naturally in people. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're saying is that the creator created the ratzon lekabel, created a kli in order for him to fill it. If you want to talk the Ari and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So that by nature, all of creation is just a kli to receive his abundance, and is not by nature have the same quality as him. Now, a creature that eventually gets to a level called Adam, similarity to the creator, is a creature. Dome is a creature who has the same quality as the creator. But it's not just that I came out of the womb and I'm Adam. Adam is a level of attainment that someone, while they're living, can reach. Not just one lucky guy or 100 lucky guys, or so you're shaking your head. So we're going to talk about it in a second.
Yeah.
But that it's just that it's no, it's good. But it's natural to love my kid.
Right.
But it's not nat. Help me.
I want to interject here just on something that kind of sums it up. Basically, this change that you described, this change between degrees, is not happening involuntarily or unconsciously, or
naturally. I'm born with it or something.
Or naturally, if you live long enough, eventually you'll learn how to love. No, that's the one thing that's different about this whole, because the creator, and this is what we sort of both see, there's modern day study that supports it, and our sages talk about it, that the human is characterized by free choice and by developing, a consciousness that is above.
Because otherwise, if I just love because that's my nature, if I just love unconditionally because that's my nature, I'm just an angel. I'm an animal. I'm an angel. I'm something because I'm not choosing it. But Adam is halfway between, Malchut and Bina, let's say, if you want to talk about like the mystical language, he's there in the middle. And that's where the choice is, because if his desire to sin or whatever we want to call it is too strong, he's going to go that way. If his desire to if he's just, for example, if the creator shines on your face, right? Like, what are you going to not do it? You know what I mean? If he gives you this blast of endless fulfillment, you're not going to follow that. So either you're an animal or an angel, but Adam is in the middle there. And so this is kind of the work that, like, that's the place that we're trying to focus on, trying to find people to do here, that even if we're all different from each other, even if we don't naturally want to be united as Jews, as a microcosm of all humanity, we need to do that work. We need to overcome all of our differences and love each other. We need to make that effort together. And by doing that, we draw this upper force down upon us, which brings, makes us this pipeline to the world of light.
So there's a slight shift in paradigm. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. We hear you.
There's a slight shift in paradigm between how I see it and how you see it, even though the language that you're using is very similar. And some of it's for sure influenced by specifically the Tanya, Chabad Hasidus, and the way in which the Tanya elucidates the kind of like the Kabbalah-based perspective that you're describing.
This is what your position is?
Yeah, my position.
Okay.
I think. I mean, I don't know anything, but I know what I know. This is my understanding of it. And
Sure.
part of what, the project that I'm working on, we call The Light Revealed. And part of the reason that we called it The Light Revealed is because one of the fundaments of Tanya, of Chabad Hasidus, but really Hasidus in general, the movement of the Baal Shem Tov, what the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, was trying to bring to the world, is a shift in consciousness in these Kabbalistic teachings. That's a little bit, it's the same as what you're talking about, but a little bit different. It's not that I have to have free will in order for me to, because if I just do what's right, if I act from a place of unconditional love.
I'm sorry. What's pleasurable? If it feels good to love the other, everybody will do it. There's no question.
It's a havish tuli b'davar, right? So,
Yeah.
so it would seem as if free will is only required when I'm stuck in between those two polarities. But in fact, part of what Hasidus added, part of what the Baal Shem Tov was trying to add to that framework, is that the free will choice is to bring oneself to a place where they reveal the natural light inside of them, which is in fact to do the right thing, not because it feels good, but because it is what you are. Great. It is not that you have to choose to do the right thing, but rather naturally who you are is to love unconditionally.
Let's say we're all naturally, let's say that's true, but for example, you're born and you're naturally, if you follow your trajectory, you're going to be the greatest heart surgeon in the world. However, you're smoking pot, hanging out, listening to Grateful Dead music on the beach. And you, at 50 years old, when you have no money in the bank, you're like, I was destined to be the greatest surgeon in the world. Why didn't it happen? Well, you had everything there for you, but you stayed on the beach and you didn't take those steps to get there. So that's, I think that's maybe the.
In other words, what's missing, and this is where we meet again, Menachem, is an environment. It goes full circle, because and really, when we strip it down, you're absolutely right, and we agree with you. You really cannot choose to fully, absolutely love the other like you love your child. You cannot love your neighbor's child. You'll always see flaws in your neighbor's children, and you will justify your own kids. This is set up by nature. But if you put yourself in an environment that really wants it and is aligned to get it, and is developing this inner cry to have it, that's a different story. Now inside of you, a new desire is awakened. And so you can keep choosing that environment, and that is really the essence of your free choice. How do I choose that environment? How do I build it and continue to choose it by continuing to support it? And I think
I'm saying something a little bit different though. What I'm saying though is that you can love you do love everyone the way you love your child. It just becomes covered up by layers of instinct that plays out. But part of what we want to realize and part of what we want to reveal is that internally, you described a system of oros and kalim, of light, of shefa, that God is shining down, and nature is kalim. But part of what a human being is not just a keli, it's keli and light. It's why human beings have free will. We are partners with the creator. And part of the realization of realizing that we are partners with the creators, we are therefore capable of innovation, right? And because we're capable of innovation and creativity, we were given a gift that all of nature was not given. And that capacity for creativity, for innovation is inlaid within that is the same capacity as the creator has to love utterly unconditionally. So even though there's a part of me that can't love other people's children the way I love other people's children, and that part of me needs to be in the environment, but part of what we need to realize as humans is that we have another part of us that is only capable of loving everyone the same. And that the reason why I choose to live in that society is because by living in that society, by living within a system, by living in that environment, it's not that it will create the unconditional love. It will allow the unconditional love to be revealed inside of me.
Okay. That's good.
There's
That's
a
good.
subtle difference that I'm trying.
Oh,
I think that part of it is like
customers.
we're
We'll
not
buy
trying
it.
to, because if what we're trying to do is not be ourselves, we're going to fail. And that's why, and people are going to give pushback. You talk about the roots of anti-Semitism.
My dad taught me something. Hold on. My dad taught me
Yeah,
something. If you
sorry.
close the deal, so you close the deal. So we're customers. We want your product. The next question is like, stop talking. You closed. The next piece is though, what about the shita? Because it's great. Okay.
Yeah.
It's great. Like, and who wouldn't want that? But where's the button? Okay, I'm a
In
customer.
fact,
So
not
give
only
me the button. Where do I
who would
push?
want that, all the nations of the world, they want that too, and they intuitively feel they can only get it if you get it. If you don't get it, they can't have it. That's the paradox that we're thrown into. We're halfway between this creator, the love, the light, all this abundance that you described, and then the poor nations of the world. You know, all they know is they only have this one-sided track to work with.
Right. Yeah.
We have this. So, okay, so how do we, so we already agree that we don't need to really deal with them. You know, even the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, don't work on Asbara, focus on yourself.
Right.
Great. So that's one tough sell. As I mentioned earlier, I came from a meeting of great minds trying to figure out how to speak to them. And I was like, no, we got to speak to ourselves. No, we become navel gazers, all those words. I was like, no, we're saying the wrong things. So we're asking you to help maybe clarify in the remaining time. How do we, kindle that quality that you said? Okay, you don't even have to choose it. It's so easy. It's even better than what we thought.
I know. We got a new selling point. It's already in you. But the question is, okay, how do I turn it on? How do we all turn it on?
How do you make it blossom?
Right. I mean, I think that what you're saying, I mean, I think what we need to do is continue to allow the evolutionary process to flow outward, which means, like you talked about, we need to ride the wave that is existent. I mean, we need to battle our enemies and ensure our safety for sure. And we need to stand up for ourselves. That's one thing we must do. We must show the world that we're not going to just let you like take a dump on us, excuse my language, and just, it's not going to happen. I remember I was in Israel shortly after, like in February. I was there late January, early February, and I spent some time in the South, like in the vicinity of where the tragedies occurred. And I remember I was talking to this guy who was like a guide for us. He was a very sweet man. And he said something like, I can't believe that we allowed ourselves to be seduced in a place that we thought it was normal to allow them to shoot rockets at us, but because we could deflect them, that made it okay. Like that was his like observation. It struck me so severely. It was such a simple point, but it struck me so severely. Like we have to show them that they can't treat us. That's one thing for sure. We have to show strength, that we're not going to allow them, most of all, to step on us. But putting that aside, I think part of what we need to do is to continue to evolve this Jewish community, global Jewish community, but also as a microcosm in Israel in specific, where you can have different people really getting along in a way that's sensible. You look at all the fights that you see on news sites, like between Haredim and Chilonim, between religious and non-religious in Israel. But then you talk to people that are on the ground, and the populace, like they're not really in conflict with one another as much as we play it out. And I think we need to like talk about this more and more, figure out how we can create more interconnection between communities, show communities how they can coexist even though they're at different levels of observance or different levels of belief. Talk about, for example, that's why I tell that story, how find the way in which we can unearth where we believe the same thing instead of talking about where we believe what's different. I think that comes down to a real problem where we're constantly focused on what we don't agree on instead of focusing on what we do agree on, right? Sometimes there we have to like tease out what it is exactly that we don't agree on because we agree on everything else. And in those points, what we agree on, we can focus on those things. And I think when we begin to do that, when we start to align ourselves with the flow of where society is going, instead of trying to like manipulate it, but rather try to fit ourselves to be like more healthy riders of that journey, I think we can begin to make a difference, and we can actually show the world something real. Like if we hate ourselves, why shouldn't the Gentiles hate us? If we can't get to if we can't get to a post-Zionist Israel, then how do we expect the world to get to a how do we expect them? This is a point I made. Like, how do we expect them to speak any differently? Not that if we speak differently, it's going to change the anti-Semites. It's not going to. That's not what I believe. But we have to change the way in which we see ourselves and what it means to be, vibrantly passionate about the state of Israel and about the Jewish people and about what it means to be Jewish, and to really up the ante. But part of what we need to talk about is the thing that I just said, which is why I don't think it's a side point. We need to talk about the fact that that's essentially who we are. Essentially who we are is light, is Or. We are not Kalim, right? When you look at me, all you see is Kalim. But who I am, which is, again, going back to the ineffable question of what is a Jew, is way more than Kalim. It's light, it's Or. And that's everyone. And when we begin to see ourselves as that, we'll begin to see other people as that. I didn't say that. Chazal, the rabbis have said this. Jewish spirituality has said this for generations, going all the way back to Moses himself, who said, "Ve'ahavta l're'echa kamocha." You have to love others as you love yourself. You only really love yourself when you understand who you are. And when you understand who you are, so you begin to see, you see that you're light, you'll see other people as light. That is the only essential answer, I think. I don't know. That's what I think.
No, you know a lot of things, actually.
Menachem, I put a little quote. We usually ask our guests if we have time for them to read us this quote. This is from Likutei Halachot, Halacha number 4. Can you do us the honor and
to read it
for us? Yeah, out loud. Yeah, if you don't
There's
mind.
a medium between the totality of the worlds and the Creator, and it is the Israeli soul, which is very high at its root and is truly a part of God. And it is the medium which links the totality of all the worlds and the Creator, and through it the abundance and vitality and existence of all the worlds are extended, and therefore everything depends on Israel.
I thought it was a good summary. Yeah,
we have a deal.
What do we know? Menachem, it's been great. I
Really
could sit
wonderful.
here to you just oppose my opinions all day long. It's great. But no,
I hope it was what you guys wanted.
No, this is wonderful.
This was great, and I think anyone who is was lucky enough to find himself under your care, whether it's the podcast or anything else you're doing, I think is very lucky. And we wish more people would find their way to your doorstep, to your tent, let's say. And we're very happy that you came to be with us here today.
Thank you for the privilege. I want to just say I was really pleasantly surprised when I was looking at your content and the movies that you put out. It's really beautiful, and the interviews you did. I mean, first of all, it's a beautiful interview. I really appreciate it. It was a really open-minded conversation. I hope it was received the way I received it, was received back by you. But it's really wonderful just to have an open dialogue. It's really fantastic. I really appreciate the privilege.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're the Jew Function, and we thank Menachem, Seth, thank you. And thank you everyone for being with us. Spread it far and wide. Our life depends on it. And we'll see you here next time, and we have a live show next Sunday. Doesn't matter when this episode comes out, there'll be a live show on Sunday as well. So take good care and love each other more. Bye-bye. Take care.